Let's talk about posts, baby. Let's talk about firm and steady. And more importantly, let's talk about 5 ways to set your fruitcage posts in and the one common mistake to avoid. First of all, let's talk about why you need a really firm fixing for like a fruitcage post. When you put the post in the ground, you're going to be tying some wires from this other post across to another post on the other side of the cage. Now, all the pressure on this post is going to be pulling this post this way. And if you don't get a good firm fixing, what will actually happen over time is this post will slowly start to lean and lean under the tension of those wires. And you'll end up tightening the wires up even more because they're slack, and that'll pull the post more, tighten them up again, and it will pull again. So it's important to try and get a firm fixing for these posts up front so that when you put the tension on these wires, the post stays steady. So without further ado, let's look at your options. Option one is just to put a top brace in. So get your post to the other end, and then get a reasonably sturdy piece of wood across. Now you can see we've joined this one together, and it needs to be a reasonably good piece of wood. Disadvantage this way is it doesn't do anything to secure as such the end posts in place. They still can wobble around. You need the extra material for putting across the top, but the huge advantage is it's really simple and easy. So that's option number one. Option number two. So if you're inside of a fruit cage and you've got a really sturdy fruit cage, which we've got a reasonably sturdy fruit cage here, just a simple case of getting some strapping around the fruit cage and connect it to your pole. And that creates enough tension on there so that when these wires try to pull the pole the other way, it will keep it in place. Another cheap and simple option. Obviously, the advantage is really simple and quick to do. Disadvantage is you do need a firm structure, otherwise this is just going to pull the structure over as well. So that's option number two. Option number three. Option number three is to do like we would do with a tree or a post, and that is to drive a stake into the ground in here and then attach that to the pole, giving it a nice brace that you can use. Obviously the disadvantage of this is you need extra material, need to drive another stake into the ground, and also it's using up your growing space. Coming up here is going to have to get around this pole. It's not a big deal, but again, and it's not the cleanest and easiest, it's not the cleanest basically way of doing things. It's reasonably easy, but as I say, you do need to drive this stake in reasonable to actually get it to work. So that's option number three. Option number four. Now, option number four is a sort of option that you normally see out in an open field, and it's very often if you go to see the grapevines anywhere, and this is what they've done when they've got to their end post. And that is to tie some wire around the post and then take that wire out to the ground and then whack in a massive, great big anchor peg, and then create some tension on that, which will pull the pole that way, allowing these wires to be nice and strong going the other way. Now, obviously, the disadvantage of that is that it is a trip hazard, and in a small allotment area and space like that, very often you don't have the space. We don't have the space here in this fruit cage to actually run a wire further that way because this is our walkway. And also, you still have the problem that you need to make sure that that anchor peg that you're putting in is really nice and strong. So that's the fourth way. So, way five. And for this, I'm going to use a little bit of forces. So, let's imagine this is our fence post in the ground, and the ground level is about here. Now, assume that there's wires are coming off this way, and so for this post to lean in the ground, if this is the ground level, it needs to either, the top part of this post needs to push its way that way through the ground, like that, or alternatively, if this is fixed, the bottom half of the post needs to push itself that way in the ground. So on most posts, the only thing that's stopping that is the cross surface area of the post, which isn't a great deal of space normally. So what we want to do is we want to find a way to stop that post being pushed forward at the top and stop it being pushed back at the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to dig a hole, and we're going to make sure that we can get this surface area here and the surface area here as large as possible. The way we're going to do that is when we sink that post in, we're going to get a block of wood, we're going to put it behind the post there and the front of the post on this side. And that means that instead of that surface area being pushed through the soil, we've now got that whole massive, great big surface area. And that means that the post has got nowhere to go. So let's dig a hole, and we'll start there. And while we're doing that, we'll talk about the one common mistake that a lot of people make that will result in failure. Okay, we've got our hole now, and as you see, we've got the post in place, and we've put this bottom board at the back, and that will stop this post pushing itself backwards. So we want to make sure is that this post is tight up against that board. And then we're going to get a little bit of soil just around the back there, just a tiny little bit, just to get that board in place. So let's get that in there, and then we're just going to tamp that down. I can use an old piece of wood or a proper tamping bar. I tend to, when I'm out at this depth, is just use the ends of my mallet. Just really get that compacted down. Okay, so then we're just going to take our spirit level and just check the post in terms of its straightness. Now I talked earlier about the one common mistake that people make, and that is, having got this far and done all the hard work of digging this out, the temptation now is to actually throw all the soil back in the hole and then just put your foot on top of it and stamp it down. Unfortunately, that's not how soil works. If you do that, what's going to actually happen is that the top couple of inches of soil will be really compacted down by your foot. But the 6 inches or so, 6 to 8 inches below that, isn't going to get compacted if you try and compact it from the surface. So you're going to end up with a whole load of loose soil in there. So essentially what you've got is you've now got a post that's sitting in the ground, it's got really compacted soil around the top and really loose soil around the bottom. And that's going to mean the bottom of the pole is really easily going to move around. So if you do nothing else when you're setting a pole, that is, when you're refilling it in, fill in a couple of inches layer of soil, and then tamp that down really hard. The advantage of having really firm soil around your post is, one, obviously it stops it moving, but also it means from a drainage point of view, it doesn't hold the water quite so much, and all the water from the gathers around here will run off into the looser soil around. So really get that compacted right down. Then obviously check your level, add a bit more soil, and repeat the process all the way to the top, where we will be putting, and when we get to the top, just before we get to the top of the surface, we'll be getting this other board, and we're going to be putting that board in there and tamping that down into space. And that is then going to provide a really firm fixture for this post. So I'm going to get on and do that and show you the results when we get to the top. So there we go, fill back up to the top. Here's the top board in place. Now you'll know whether you've been compacting this enough when you've been putting it in, because you actually end up with not enough soil to fill the hole. And if you think about when you've planted stuff before, you chuck the compost in, you firm it down, and you end up with soil left over from what you've dug out. Now, when you're compacting down like this, and you really are compacting it down hard, what you'll find is that actually by the time you get to the top, you've actually used all the soil that you actually dug out, because now it's now a lot firmer and compacted, it's taking up less space. So that's a good sign as to whether it says. So we've got this one in, and this is, there you go, it's pretty firm and in place now. So that will take the support things. Now, for these particular ones, we're going to do a combination of this to make sure the bottom doesn't move. And because we've got a nice secure cage, we're going to be strapping them to the top. So these are 50mm posts. So they're natural wood, so they do have a bit of flex in them. So join us on the next episode where we'll be talking about wiring these up, getting nice straight lines and getting nice firm wires on these that will actually support your canes long into the future and won't end up getting really saggy. We'll see you again then.